welcome. This is, well, I've forgotten the count. I don't know which startup grind event this is, but we took a break for a month or so. Just wanted to kind of take a breather from a series of events that we'd organized. Plus, some of us got involved in our own startup activities and so on and so forth. But it's good to be back together again. And this time around, we are doing a few things different. One of them being the venue. Like we said, beautiful venue. We also reached out to a gentleman or a startup entity out in Madison rather than focusing ourselves just on Milwaukee. We thought, let's get somebody from a little further away, learn from them as to what's exciting in their life, what they are doing. Also, the format of this, we started experimenting with the format last time, if you remember, those who were there last time. Rather than do a moderated session with the featured speaker and then do a Q&A, we thought we'll just get the conversation flowing and encourage you to ask questions as and when you have questions about whatever Luke is talking about. So don't hold your questions. And if you want to interject in the conversation, please do so. Ask your question and let's keep the conversation flowing. There's no defined structure to this. The whole idea is to go through Luke's story, especially Redox story, and try to learn from him as to what the challenges were, what he learned, what he didn't learn, what would he do differently, and so on. But in that process, anything that you can think of which you would like to know more about, by all means, just ask away. So with that, a quick introduction on Luke and Redox. Well, I'll let him speak about himself, but about Redox and what excited about us about getting him here in Milwaukee. And he just summarized it for me before we started the event. So 400K to start off, 3.5 million as the next round, and they just closed their 10 million round. And these guys are growing like these guys are growing like crazy in a market which is in a state of flux. I mean, health technology. Mark is shaking his head there. That's a tough market to be at. So demonstrating this kind of success is just phenomenal, and kudos to these guys. So with no further ado, Luke, Bonney, and we'll start the conversation. I'll skirt around here. We'll start with you, Luke.
This is so Wisconsin.
This is so Wisconsin, right?
Yeah. I like this.
Is that an old fashioned?
Right. I ordered first. I would have ordered an old fashioned.
Yeah, that's an old fashioned.
You drink them only with brandy, though. Yeah, so
you don't have to. Wisconsin, anything goes.
Yeah, so
let's start with you. Cornell to Redox. Let's talk through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I typically get pretty bored when people are up in front speaking. So as frequently and as often as you guys want to ask questions, that would be appreciated. I was really excited when I found out I didn't have to prepare any PowerPoint slides. So really do appreciate the venue and the approach. So yeah, my story, I actually grew up in upstate New York.
So sorry.
Yeah, well, when you look at upstate New York, it was like literally a town of 14,000 people. My summers were like, it sounds corny, but like baling hay and picking sweet corn. So moving to Wisconsin, they're like, oh, you're from New York, you're such a coastie. I'm like, I don't know what a coastie is. I met those people when I went to school. But yeah, I grew up in a small town. I went to school at Cornell, which was like an hour, just an hour south. I was always really interested in medicine, on the clinical side of work. My undergraduate career was basically spent figuring out, do I want to be a research scientist? Do I want to be a doctor? And luckily I found out I didn't want to be either of those things, which was probably the best thing that came out of my undergraduate career. The other thing that I discovered is I actually ended up living in Egypt for 6 months working for a really small IT company, for like a 30-person dev shop. Between my junior and senior year.
How did that happen?
The reason that happened is because I had an internship in San Diego that fell through about 6 weeks before I was going to move to San Diego. And I sat down with my dad and I was like, I have no plans for my junior summer between my junior and senior year. I think I want to go do this thing in Egypt. And he was like,
I'll go to Egypt.
All right, cool, go do it. I'll call you every week to make sure you come home. But that was where I started to really open up. I had been immersed in life sciences and working in a wet lab and all that stuff. That opened up my eyes to software. And I graduated in 2008. If anybody remembers what was going on in 2008,
Oh yeah.
Bear Stearns, ceased to exist. Lehman Brothers, which have been around for a really long time, ceased to exist. At Cornell, people who were very confident in going and getting jobs in Wall Street and large consulting firms or investment banks were realizing that jobs had been cut by 60%. So then it became really hard to get into grad school because everybody had the same idea, which was, why don't I go get more education? And that's when I found Epic. And that was just a resume drop, and somebody said, listen, healthcare plus IT, maybe this would be a good fit for you. I honestly couldn't put Madison, Wisconsin on a map at that point. This was pre-Affordable Care Act, so no one had ever heard of an electronic medical record. And my dad was like, you just got back from Egypt and now you're gonna move to Wisconsin, whatever. But flew out and ended up really falling in love with both the company and Wisconsin and Madison. I ended up working there for 6 years on the implementation team. What that means is I was one of those guys who got on the plane every single week, was flying out to large health systems all across the country. I ended up working with probably 7 or 8 of them to help them set up all the different pieces of software they needed to manage, front of the house, back of the house, clinical, outpatient, inpatient, all that stuff. And did that until I had done it enough times where I identified that I didn't want to be a professional EMR implementer the rest of my life. And then that's where I met up with Nico and James. They had also been at Epic. They had left a year earlier in 2013, and we ran into each other as kind of that group of people who work on projects that aren't approved but should be done. It's kind of the fly under the radar until you do something that gets big enough where it can't be shut down, was the mentality that we kind of coalesced around. They left, and they were actually 2 of the guys who ended up starting 100 State. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of 100 State. I'm happy to talk about it because I think it's a really interesting story. But 100 State was became what is now like a 400-person co-working space. And they started that because they had their own things they were working on. And when they stepped out into the Madison ecosystem, they realized there was no center of gravity. There was no place where they could go to talk to other entrepreneurs who were trying to figure out what it is they wanted to do. I got involved when we realized about a year into the 100 State experiment that 40% of the people coming through the door were Epic people, ex-Epic people. And we said, how can we take advantage of this talent, of this density, of this knowledge? And we started what we called 100 Health, co-branded, totally separate organization, that for 10 months, all we did was incubate health tech companies. So we actually launched 7 different health tech applications doing different things with different founders, different legal entities. And Redox was the result of trying to grow these 7 different health tech companies, realizing that each of them was going to have the same problem, which is if I need to scale tech and healthcare, I need to have a scalable integration solution. So in many ways, this kind of arc that started graduating from Cornell got us to Redox through total happenstance, and it only makes sense retrospectively. But yeah, that was really the kind of genesis of what it is that we decided to do, and it was really, I feel, at the end of the day, people say, what is the biggest lesson in that story? The biggest lesson is I feel really freaking lucky having been in these positions and met these people at a time when this idea really made sense.
But in this journey, even though you say you felt lucky, but at any point in time, did you think about maybe this is not the right thing to do in Wisconsin, especially?
I think if I had been smarter, I would have been more worried about that. Honestly, looking back, the decision to leave my comfortable, well-paying, pretty predictable job was easy for a couple reasons. Number one, it was easy to decide to leave because failure to me was going back to that job. Right? Like at the end of the day, trying to do a startup, putting my energy into it. The worst case, I made a decision up front. I wasn't going to go into debt, as an example. I wasn't going to cross certain thresholds. But I said, if this doesn't work in a year, I'll just go back to continue doing what I'm doing. The idea of doing it in Madison, yes or no, I couldn't even think about that for like the first year and a half, because it was so focused on, we were actively throwing spaghetti against the wall, and we were so focused on trying to figure out which of these pieces of spaghetti was going to stick.
Right.
I didn't even consider it. When we got past the kind of what is it we're building, and is there this very glimmer of a hope of having this thing they call product market fit, and we started talking about raising capital, and my first interaction with angel groups, and realizing that a lot of people who sit in angel groups take a lot of education to help them understand how software works. That was the first time I said, are we really going to do this in Madison? And the thing that I just kept coming back to is the people who I want to be around are here, the lifestyle that I want to live is here, the cost of living, my ability to take capital and deploy it really efficiently, it's better done here than anywhere else. And then what we found as we went from the angel round to the first venture round to the second round is there's actually a growing population of investors whose core thesis is we need to invest outside of the coasts because capital is no longer as efficient as it could be in New York and San Francisco. We actually think there's better value for our money in places exactly like Wisconsin. So we were able to, again, I would call it luck, but.
So I'll jump in on the comment you just made. You've obviously gone through a lean launch or a lean startup. So with the business model canvas, is Epic in the key competitor? Or where do they fit? What's your relationship with them?
Yeah, so I think we're in a really interesting space that it only happens in, I guess the way I think about it is if you look at the industry, if you look at healthcare in general, there's a huge amount of transformation that's happened in a relatively short amount of time. And what I'm talking about specifically is the digitization of healthcare, spurred by the government's incentives.
So meaningful use?
Meaningful use, yeah. A part of the Affordable Care Act, meaningful use was like $21 billion that got pumped into the economy to incentivize health systems to adopt EMRs. And what we are doing would not be possible without broad-based, the demand for what we do wouldn't be possible without the broad-based adoption of electronic medical records. But at the end of the day, what we're solving for is really a piece that is adjacent and separate from what the EMRs do. It is, what we are solving for is the fact that there's an expectation that data is available, that we can interact with it, that data lives in separate silos at health systems all across the country. Some of those silos are Epic, some of them are Cerner, some of them are Allscripts. But our core consumer, our core customer, are the applications and developers building tools that need to be deployed everywhere.
To integrate all those different databases.
That's
Across
exactly
all the
right.
platforms.
Across all the platforms.
Piece of cake.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed, I'm sorry, my background is IT,
Gotcha.
but that's not what my entrepreneurial venture is all about. That we're in the 21st century, and you're talking today that this data is not digitized, or hasn't been digitized until recently.
Yeah.
Within 5 to 10 years.
Well,
Yeah.
it's
It blows my mind.
it's not done yet.
Well, it's,
Only about 50% of healthcare providers are using
1%.
AMRs yet, so
What percent?
50%.
50?
well, it's
50.
closer
Yeah.
to 90% of physicians are now documenting core notes.
Yeah.
But so to answer your question, I think there are days when I feel like Epic could be a competitor. There are days when I feel like they're our partner. But at the end of the day, where it's very clear that the market needs to go is something like Redox needs to exist, which is a platform that exists across all these EMRs in order to unleash what is all of this data that needs to be used. Whether you're a developer or another health system or a patient, you have the right to have access to that data. And that's really the core problem that I think about. So at the end of the day, it doesn't keep me up at night. It is an evolution, and it's part of educating a market that is really big. It has gone through drastic change. And when you look at the decision makers, they're still educating themselves on what this really means, having gone from a paper world to a digital world in a relatively short amount of time.
I had a question on your story from going from upstate New York to Madison. At what point did you sort of realize, like, hey, I can be a CEO, I can run a company?
I've never realized that. The true story, and people don't believe you when I tell this, the true story is there was a moment when we had to decide we wanted to stop doing 100 Health, and 100 Health was the incubator concept, and to start doing Redox. And that wasn't like a moment in time. There was a series of conversations where we had to emotionally come to grasps with the fact that we were going to stop working with these 7 companies and start doing our own thing. And there was literally a meeting when we were drafting up the documents, and we said, who's going to be CEO? And it was one of our friends, it was a lawyer, literally had 3 straws, and whoever drew the short straw was going to be the CEO, and that was me. Now, if I look at the 3 of us, James was clearly going to be the CTO, because he was a developer. So if he had drawn the short straw, he would have been CTO and CEO. Do I think it worked out? Absolutely. I think I love what I do. It's incredibly challenging. I describe it as I need to learn a new sport every 6 months. It's not a race. It's like, the race changes pretty quickly. But that's the honest truth. Is I see myself externally. I need to become a CEO, but internally and how I think about the team, it's I solve whatever problem needs to be solved today.
Yeah.
That somebody else is in.
That's the way it should be, yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about your challenges.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Talk about your challenges, especially last 6 months. Because things are moving very fast.
6 months ago, my challenge was I was running out of money and I had to go raise some more money.
Let's talk about that one.
So that money you were running out of, I want to back up just a little bit. Was it angel funding or was it venture funding?
Yeah, so part of the decision to shift from 100 Health to Redox, and to put time around this was like September, October of 2014 is when this discussion was happening, is we were trying to get people in the Madison community excited about this idea of 100 Health as a health tech accelerator incubator. And we thought we were really smart. We came up with this great pitch, and we just could not get what we thought were the obvious folks to come invest in us to say yes. And that was part of our, we were dumb in many ways, but one of the smart things was like, if you can't get people to say yes, maybe you're asking the wrong kind of question. Mm-hmm. And then when we started to talk about Redox, these same conversations moved very differently. And it was, that looks like a real problem that I understand. That looks like a scalable business if you could figure it out. So our first pass at raising money was aligned with when we decided to really take Redox on as this core concept. So that was working with angels in Madison. We did talk to, I think it's Golden Angels is the group here.
Yeah.
We talked to Ed and a couple of those guys. But really the key for us very upfront was getting a guy named Mark Bakken, who at that point was stepping down from Nordic, who he had started and grown, as our very first authoritative, I understand healthcare, I understand IT, I'm behind this company. He said yes, and then we were able to quickly raise the angel round coming out of that. And that all of that happened with about 8 weeks.
So is that angel 400,000? So that was an equity base?
It ended up being a $350K, and then at a later date we joined an incubator in Baltimore called Dream It, and they added an additional, they basically addended that.
Okay, but that was equity?
So Baltimore has talent?
Baltimore has Johns Hopkins, which is, are you from Baltimore?
Yeah.
Nice. We were in Baltimore during the riots, which is a whole other story that we
So was
You both live in Wisconsin now.
What was your question one more time?
So with the
Equity versus no.
How do you value the company?
So we pushed. So this is an interesting question. I think we pushed really hard to do a convertible note.
Okay.
Right? Like we read all the books. We read all the the 500 startups and the Y Combinator guys, and it's like you can't. I think even at our current stage, it's really hard to do a revenue multiple to price it out. And we said, hey Mark, listen, we really think the best model here is a convertible note. unfortunately, he had just been burned on a convertible note a couple deals ago and was not interested in a convertible note. So we said, okay, let's pick some numbers out of the air. And the way I went about it is I played forward 1 to 2 equity rounds, and I said, there are some metrics, right? Like you can do, I think PitchBook was what I was looking at. You could do, you can look at seed rounds, you can look at Series A rounds to say, what is mean value? Pre-money, post-money, what is the mean raise? Yeah. And you at least ballpark it, we're between here and here, and if I have demand, I can drive price up. If I don't have demand, I price it down. But that was probably the 3 to 4 weeks of like, is this gonna happen or not, was really around that question at the very beginning. And at the end of the day, we said, Mark's our ticket. And I think that has played out. He was the ticket. He was the thing that got other people in the space comfortable with what we were doing.
But he had background in the technology.
So Nordic is a consulting company that he founded. It's now, I think, 800 consultants. Started in 2010. That has literally gone like this. That only consults to health systems that use Epic. So he had, and in the Madison ecosystem.
And he was an angel investor.
He started it, but he became an angel investor in us. So yeah.
So who did your A?
So our A, the way that those things connected is we ended up doing Dream It, which was the accelerator. They were only doing health tech, which we thought was important for us because healthcare is unique enough that if us going to a general accelerator or incubator, we didn't think there was going to be a ton of value there. So we ended up joining Dream It. Our A round came about really from a smart move from Dream It. What they realized is that the classic demo day concept, which is all you get down to after 2 or 3 months of practicing your pitch and working on your product and proving traction and all of these things, you pitch to a bunch of people as part of a demo day. They realized that the quality of their companies warranted that they weren't going to get the quality of investor in Baltimore, Maryland to come to that. So what they did is they took half the funds that they were going to donate to demo day, and instead, with 50% of the funds, they did matchmaking between all of their groups and investors in New York, Boston, and San Francisco. And we basically went and we spent a day and a half in each one of those locations, put together a 1-page executive summary, emailed the dozen or 20 VCs in all those spaces, and we ended up through that process meeting 406, who is an investor out of Boston. They only do health tech and cybersecurity. The specific partner is a guy named Liam, has been doing health tech investing since the late 90s, and we immediately hit it off. And we were originally going to raise a $1.6 million round. He looked at our model and said, this is going to be a lot harder than you guys think. We think you should raise $3 million. He was absolutely right. But that was another story similar to Mark being the first one. We were able to take that interest from Liam at 406. We turned that into 4 term sheets, which was validation that it was time for us to raise this round. We negotiated those 4 term sheets down to terms that made sense for us. That started probably in July, and we ended up closing in late September. And that was a $3.5 million round.
And then from the A to the, we're in between our A and B right now.
Gotcha.
So like I am out of my mind
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
And so we could have an offline conversation. So I'm not going to take it up here, but the valuation and everything else, and then you're to get the B. I mean,
Yeah.
You said you were almost through. I mean, we're right in the same place.
So we probably had 6 months conservatively, but I knew we needed to grow faster than that. The way that I have generally approached fundraising is I build relationships constantly. And I do that because, and this happened with the B round, is when we raised the A, one of the things we did is as part of this process I talked about with Dream It, we probably talked to 60 different groups. And when you talk to that volume, what quickly became apparent is we needed a way to compare. How do we rank 60 different groups? Which ones do we want to work with? Which ones do we not want to work with? And the criteria we developed is, number one, is this person, the partner, somebody who I could work with for the life of my company? That was number one. Number two is, what's the value this firm brings? In healthcare, if they don't understand the space, they're more likely to be a liability than they are to be an asset. And then number three was the terms. And solving for those first two is really relationship building at the end of the day. So the way we've approached it is get to meet these people, talk to these people as much as you possibly can before ever pulling the trigger on the
Would you have
terms.
breakfast meetings, lunches, or?
Ask yourself, will you take them home to mom?
That's right.
Would I take them home to mom?
Yeah. Mom would eat them all alive, but.
For us, it's more like, I wish I would have gone for more, so I don't have to go again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd much rather have a small piece of something huge than a huge piece of nothing any day.
Yeah.
And except explaining that to my wife is a whole different story. But
Well, that was at the very. I think one thing that we did that was smart retrospectively is we decided very early on that we wanted Redox to be something huge, and as opposed to being something that we were going to turn around in 2 or 3 years. We kind of said that, but there was actually a moment last summer when we had our first real acquisition offer, and we were kind of like, this is a real question that we have to face, and that discussion allowed us to all crystallize that as a founding, as the 3 founders and the really early employees, we were way more motivated by the opportunity to build something huge than we were to do something for 2 or 3 years. That's not true for everybody. I'm not saying that's the right answer, but having that out in front of us as a consistent theme or a principle has allowed us to get way more comfortable knowing that we're going to have to go back to the well from an investment standpoint more than once.
So did you quantify based on how many lines of code you have to write for this? Or?
In terms of how we valued?
Right.
If you were to roughly shake it out, the angel round is all about what's the opportunity, is a real opportunity, and do you have a team that you can convince other people can execute on that opportunity? So that's how we really talked about the angel round. The Series A was, we can prove that we have built a thing. This is a team that can build that thing, and we have customers who are paying us and are very much starting to use it. The Series B was, we have this many we have customers like this, the type of customer is changing like this, and here's roughly what it looks like to start to scale this thing. Now you get lots of different opinions on really what that means, but I've thought less about it as a seed or a Series A or a Series B. If you look at our actual valuation and our terms for the B, if we were to raise that money on the coast, it would be squarely in like, this is what an A round looks like. I've thought about it in terms of what's the maturity level of the company to identify what's the amount of capital that's reasonable and who's the type of investor who makes these type of bets. One of the things I did realize early is that there are people who only work really early, there are people who only work really late. You got to find the type of person who knows and understands the stage of the company that you're at, which was really, really useful. Cool. What other questions do we have? Yeah.
So threats to your business model, is things like fire can undermine the need for a company?
Yeah, so I think fire is really interesting. We're actually really excited about what fire brings to the table. Similar to what I talked about before, we look at the ecosystem, and the thing that's not going to change anytime soon is that you have these siloed health systems all across the place. Each of these different guys has their own implementation with their own configurations that's unique and different. And when we think about the problem that we're solving, from a technical standpoint, what we provide is you build your application once, you code it to Redox, and that's all you got to care about, right? Like it is truly like we let you scale in the same way that Twilio lets you scale when you think about sending a text message. When was the last time a developer had to worry about, does my consumer use AT&T or Verizon? The answer is like 2007 when Twilio became a thing. That's the same way we think about Redox and this type of stuff. So fire, at the end of the day, modernizes some of the infrastructure that lives at the health system.
What is fire?
Fire is a new standard that is coming out that is an exchange standard. But when we look at fire, what we see is it doesn't solve the connectivity problem, which is still the thousands of point-to-point integrations that you need to look at. And it also doesn't solve the customization. When you look at the data that comes across, it still needs to be mapped and normalized. which is the second thing that we really focus
So
on.
what do you normalize it to? Not RIM, I would hope.
We have our own API. We've authored our own data model.
Okay.
We've debated that for a long time, but we honestly think we can move faster, we can serve our customers much faster by looking across the ecosystem, what are the standards, where they are, and we just author it ourselves.
So you provide the infrastructure, are you cloud-based?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's what the capital is needed, all the
Yeah.
server hardware.
Well, like 80% of our capital is human, salaries, as with most software startups. But now we're starting to spend real money on cloud storage, and we're talking about security, be a HIPAA compliant and all that.
So to
stuff.
scale up, you're looking at more developers.
Yep, absolutely.
Exclusively US-based for now?
Canada, Netherlands.
Okay.
The big thing that we look at is data sovereignty. So different countries, you have to host, even if you're cloud-based, you have to host in that country. So Europe is an example where,
EU especially, right?
yeah, there's 2 or 3 different, I think Ireland and Germany, you have to host within the country. Otherwise, you can host more generally and they can share data.
Even British Columbia had its own, cannot go out of the US and can't go out of the
That's
BC.
exactly right. So British Columbia and Nova Scotia are the 2 provinces that have, in Canada, that have similar sort of stuff. The rest of Canada is fine, but for whatever reason, those 2 provinces are a pain in the butt.
So you're populating these databases, I mean, they're existing hard copy documents. Who's doing all the data entry?
So the way to think about healthcare is EMRs have actually come in and replaced the paper forms with software that runs on a computer. So when you read in the New York Times things about physician burnout, people being unhappy with their jobs because everything's changing, what they're really talking about is, I used to be able to, for 30 years in med school up till today, I wrote my notes on a piece of paper, I wrote my prescription on a prescription pad, and now I have to enter all of that information into a computer. That interface is the electronic medical record today. So what we're doing is we're taking information that lives in that electronic medical record and making it available to other parties that need and want access to it. Cool.
This audience has really made it easy for me. I've hardly asked any questions. So coming back to you made a point about exit. You're in this to make Redox something really big, rather than spend a couple of years or 3 years and bail out. Did you share that with the investors? And how did they respond?
That was an important. I mean, honestly, when the way that I have internalized my relationship with our investors is I really do consider them a member of our team. I consider them our investment team. And the first investor helped us find the second investor, helped us find the third investor, and they all had to have a shared mentality of, we're looking to build something really, really significant, something really big. And because of that, they're aggressive about what the next round of fundraising looks like, as well.
Right.
I feel strongly that just like any relationship, investing in it and being open and honest and transparent turns it from something that slows you down into something that can really speed you up. We had a really early investor, one of the angels, who was in the category of slowing us down. And it took a couple really difficult conversations to basically say, listen, I know you have great intentions, but we're going down this path, we need to go fast, and the way you're choosing to interact with us and support us is slowing us down. But I think there's a lot of people who are naturally distrustful of their investors, and I think, to your point, could you bring them home to mom? I mean, I am at the point where we have the investor relationship is not even just through me. Anybody on the team can talk to any one of our investors whenever they want, if they think there's valuable networking opportunities or strategic advice or whatever it needs to be. And that's only because that was an expectation set up front, and it was part of the criteria to say we think this is a good fit. Will that be true forever? Probably not, but that's at least how we think about it now. I can't imagine a day where I can't be open with the information when it comes to strategically driving the company forward. I just can't manage too many realities. So I need, perhaps it's a fault and it'll come back to bite me in the butt, but I'm pretty open with the investors that we work with.
Okay.
So we'll see.
So one other thing, right in the beginning, you talked about you didn't start that way, but eventually you got to the product market fit. So when you started off, it was a bit more nebulous in terms of what you're trying to really tackle, who will actually buy it, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
How did you go about getting to a point where?
Yeah. So we absolutely did a lean canvas.
Mm-hmm.
We did like dozens of them. For us at the very beginning, the core question was, is Redox something that we sell directly to health systems, or is Redox something that we sell directly to applications and vendors?
Right.
And the way we tested that is we got on the phone with as many, CIOs at health systems as we possibly could. And we had conversations. What we realized is that selling directly to health systems is a 12 to 18 month sales process.
Mm-hmm.
Takes forever. Healthcare does not understand platforms as a technology. They're barely at the point where they understand point solutions.
Yeah.
So we basically said, okay, that's option one, which is this going to take a really long time and take a whole bunch of education. In parallel to that, we went and we said, okay, we went to a bunch of websites and we picked out 30 totally random health tech companies, and we literally went to their home pages and we called the number at the bottom of the website. And we said, hey, my name's Luke. I used to work at Epic. Can I talk to your CTO or CEO? And if we couldn't get them on the phone, we would email them. And I basically said, if we built this thing and described what it is we were doing, would you buy it? And total cold call, we got about a 90% hit rate in like 48 hours. And they all said, listen, if you built this, I would have bought it yesterday. So that helped us, you can think about Redox as a market in that we have health systems on one side and applications on the other side. The beauty of what we're doing is that we add a tremendous amount of value to one side of the market, which is the application vendors, by enabling their business, right? We give them the data that they need, and it's a very specialized heavy lift for them otherwise. While we're helping them, we're also building this massive network that we get to reuse to support an entire ecosystem.
Right.
So it was, and it's still a debate, right? There were pendulums that swung back and forth, but we tried to stick to listen to the customer, test it, and respond to what the customer kind of.
Now, do you have to have a business associate agreement with a healthcare institution, and then you can serve multiple apps from that, or?
So our model right now is really, 80% of it is we are contracted directly with a third-party application.
Okay.
They sign a contract with Freighter, as an example. We are their subcontractor.
Okay.
We have a BAA relationship. So a BAA, just so you guys know, is how we have legal protection to share and store what's called PHI, personal health information, which is the type of information that the federal government regulates. It basically says you can't share this stuff unless a patient gives you consent to it. So we're primarily contracted underneath that.
Okay.
In about 50% of the cases, we end up signing a BAA directly with the health system, which is totally cool. Once we're in the door and we go live with the first application, that's when we pick up the phone and we call the CIO and we say, you might not have ever heard of us, but that project that you just executed that went flawlessly, well, that was us, and would you like to use us for additional projects and additional applications? Okay. So our approach to selling directly to health systems is basically get in the door, execute, add value, then engage in the conversation, which has proven to allow us to go a lot faster. But all of that was just, we had to figure that out on the fly.
So you talk about your vision has always been trying to create something big out of Redox. What's next? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, so we've always organized the company. There was two things we did early on that was smart in retrospect. One was we wrote down our values. So when we were like a 6-person company, we looked around the table and we kind of collectively agreed, I'm really proud of this team, even at 6 people. This is a group of people who I would love to work with on any project. And we asked ourselves why, and we wrote those things down. And those have been our values, and we've iterated on them. but that's been really core. The second thing that we did is we said, what is the metric or what is the measure of success for the whole company? And we decided that the measure of success for the company, the thing that we call our Truenorth Metric, is the total number of production connections. And a production connection is a unique combination of application A to health system A. However many one of these, we want to do as many of these as we possibly can, because by turning these on and actually exchanging data between these entities, we're having real impact in the world and achieving the mission. And honestly, this is what we get paid for. So our mission and vision for, since the beginning has been maximizing, going as fast as we possibly can to maximize that Truenorth metric. And everything that we've done has been below that, to basically say, what's the strategy, what's the go-to-market, what is the different ways that we could build our product. I think we're getting to a point, we're live at close to 100 health systems. We're getting to a point where there is a next vision of what does this product really look like for us to enable an entire ecosystem. Today we have applications in health systems. There's a third and fourth component. Third would be users at the health system, so the actual physicians and nurses. And fourth would be patients. And I think we need to have a compelling and coherent argument around how we support both of those things in order for us to really achieve what we want to do and transform the whole space. So that's on our list of things to figure out.
Not to go too deep into that, but is this kind of like the blue, what is it called, the blue button application?
Yeah, so Blue Button is another standard that has been talked about in healthcare, where it's you can almost think about it as an email, where patients can say, I'm going to hit this blue button and I'm going to send some of my information that lives here over there. Like a lot of standards, it was mandated by the government, and it kind of did one of these. So no one's actually using it. The infrastructure to support it never really got built out. I think that could be one version of it. I think the way we think about it today is we think there's a future that's not too far off, where patients want to authorize use of their data to different applications. A patient would say, hey, I'm choosing to use this tool to video chat with my physician, or I want to use that tool to share my my activity of daily living, so I can my case manager or whatever can help me manage my when I wake up, when I go to sleep, those sorts of things. That's more of how we see it going. Honestly, we don't know. The way we think about it today is we build infrastructure for other people to build on top of. We expose the API, or we expose the platform, and then what's been really exciting is you can build that shared piece of infrastructure, and there's dozens or hundreds or thousands of use cases that you can enable. So that's kind of how we think about it. Yeah.
So you just went into my next question, is how does telehealth and all this remote monitoring, which is my wheelhouse, tap into what you're talking about? Because what we do is you give us your API, we'll send all the data from every medical peripheral and ADL peripheral there is,
right.
Period. Mm-hmm. And we can send it to you direct without a cloud. Mm-hmm. And we use your API. So do you see that as sort of what needs to happen? I guess.
Yeah, so I mean,
validate what I'm trying to figure out.
So we have a lot of customers who are operating in the telehealth space, right? There's behavioral telehealth, there's acute, in the acute care space, there's consultative. A lot of those guys use our API to communicate, whether it's scheduling information or patient demographic information, to expose parts of the patient's chart so that a physician can review that information in preparation for whatever the encounter might be. The way we think about that is we could enable telemedicine wherever it is that they need to go, and do it in a way where you guys don't have to build those pipes yourself, right? Like, you guys get to build a great product, a great user experience, have a dev team that can really focus on that. We're going to build pipes, and it can support your telemedicine solution, it can support the diabetes management solution, it can support the analytics platform. Once those pipes are in place, they should be reused, is really how we think about it.
Is that happening?
Yeah, I mean, we're live at health systems all across the country, and we're getting organic reusage of those pipes, meaning you go live at a Johns Hopkins, or you go live at some of these places, And then just because of our customers and who are the health systems that are actively buying innovative technology, they're driving to the same places and they're sitting on top of the same pipes.
I think your what you're building is much bigger than just healthcare.
It could be.
I think this infrastructure that you're building can be applied to a number of different industries.
So the first blurring that we're seeing right now, which is I think at just a more global level, is healthcare as you would define it, and wellness as you would define it, and living at home is all starting to smush together. So we're having really interesting conversations. You would call it the Internet of Things, but basically devices that classically live at home, sharing that information back to a care team to help, whether it's an aging person stay safely at home, whether it's a chronically ill person or somebody who's just been discharged post-surgery, to be able to track their progress. The data, and this is the incredible and very exciting thing, is once the data becomes available, it can be used in all of these different ways, which is so cool.
Through your infrastructure.
That's the idea.
So what's the cost model for some of those app developers? Because there's not a reimbursement code for a lot of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so you can build on our platform for free, just like Twilio, you can build and prototype and kick it, and then you license our software per health system that we connect you to.
No, I was saying, for example, you talked about diabetes.
Oh, I
don't
see.
think there's an ICD-9 or a CPT code that would let a primary care physician get reimbursed for reviewing continuous data of questionable value from a device
There
of
isn't any.
uncertain quality.
Yeah.
So-
So how are they doing these apps if there's, what's the reimbursement model that lets them develop the apps?
So if you look at Omada Health, who's kind of the leader in the diabetes management space,
Yeah.
they actually just finished up a couple major clinical studies with Cleveland Clinic and a couple others, and are working to get ICD-9 codes for, there's an emerging area, they combine the word digital and therapeutics, digiputics or something.
Yeah.
Something like this, where this whole concept of prescribing applications that can bend cost curves or change patient behaviors, there's the beginnings of actual evidence that this is a meaningful intervention.
Okay.
Same thing is true with telehealth. The unfortunate thing with telehealth is it's state by state. So for example, there was a big court case down in Texas where there was a decision to reimburse for telehealth, and then I think it was the state senate or whoever blocked it, and then it was reinstated. So it's clear that it's heading in this direction where technology can have meaningful impact on patient outcomes is the easiest way to think about it. So that is one model. There's another model which is kind of just classic IT, which is I'm going to sell you something that's going to make you better at what you do. I'm going to drive efficiency into your organization. And I think telehealth is another good example of this, where in many ways you could look at what we do with a telehealth solution and you could say you get the same number of providers and I can 2x your number of patient encounters because I eliminate the time and distance somebody has to travel, whether it's a patient or a provider. So we get a lot of exposure to these different models because we have so many people who are coming and talking to us, and some of them we look at, if you're selling a text messaging solution to single doc practices, good luck, right? The cost of customer acquisition is really high, and what they're willing to spend on technology is pretty low. But there's other models, there's a whole evolution of machine learning algorithms that really do take data, can drive down to really meaningful insight. It's like these health systems are going to save millions of dollars a year using your technology. But yeah, it's one of the things that's moving pretty quickly, which is exciting. And really smart entrepreneurs are figuring out they can do studies and use that information to combat the kind of naysayers.
So they typically go to CMS and try to get that, and then have the private payers just follow
They
suit?
typically get a pilot organization who's going to help them enroll patients.
Yeah.
6 months throws into 12 months, throws into 2 year. They get enough data at a prestigious enough organization where they can take that and say, hey, we're real meaningful outcomes here. We should have to reimburse them. Omada is a great example. They've done a great job with it. Sorry, sometimes we get really deep into healthcare. It's like it's a little screwed up or something. Are there any...
Continue the conversation over more food and drinks.
do that.
Sure.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a very Wisconsin thing to do.
All right, terrific. Let me formally thank Lou.
Oh, of course.
And congratulations. It's been an awesome story.
Yeah. So
made
the-
in Wisconsin story.
The one thing I was actually at a dinner yesterday with I think it was 8 or 9 founders of early stage tech companies now becoming real companies in Wisconsin in Madison, and I think there's a real desire to figure out how we can get these startup scenes to intermingle. Because the problems we face every single day are exactly the same problems. We were talking about talent, we were talking about mentorship, we were talking about capital. So I just want to take this opportunity to say, we would love to, whatever the contacts are, we would love to invite you guys to Madison. I would love to help get as many Madison folks here. I'm from the East Coast, so I don't know if there's like this Madison, Milwaukee thing. I don't care about it. I don't care about it. All I know is that Wisconsin, there's a couple of places where we have really smart people working on really awesome things, and those people should be working together.
Absolutely.
I felt strongly that I wanted to say
absolutely,
that.
I appreciate it. And we would encourage that as well. So
Yeah.
we'll look forward to doing it.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.